So this lecture is natural hazards and disaster. The word disaster is derived from a word which is disaster. There are a lot of confusions that people face. Why? You tend to confuse certain words like what is disaster, what is vulnerability, what is risk, what is capacity. Then you confuse what is preparedness, what is mitigation. Now the formation of the cyclone is a condition, an event. Normally, there is no problem. When I talk about socio-economic aspects, it has got more to do with the human being, human life, monetary aspects, and all those things. Hello aspirants, welcome to PW Only IAS. I am here Harpreet Singh with one last lecture of the Indian Physical Geography. Now please remember, it doesn't mean that the other lectures are not going to come. They're going to come. But we told you that we're going to first cover the NCERT level content for you so that forms the foundation of your preparation for the civil services examination. So this lecture is natural hazards and disaster. Now please remember students, with respect to the NCERT, we have covered all the aspects that are required according to this chapter. Let's begin and analyze what are the various dimensions associated with this particular chapter. Let's begin. Before we begin the chapter, this is the link or the QR code for my Telegram account where you can find this particular PDF along with a lot of other aspects that are associated with the civil services preparation, like the anthropology optional content, the society, and even geography as we are studying. Till now, if you analyze, we have covered 6 lectures. First, the Indian location, and these are basically the representation of those chapters and what we have done in those particular chapters. So, India location, structure and physiography, the drainage system. Then we have the climate, then we have the natural vegetation, and we have the soil. Now, please remember students, as we had mentioned in the last lecture also, we are trying our best to give you the best content possible so that you achieve your goal. Now, please remember, merely seeing this lecture, definitely it is going to help you, but merely seeing this lecture is not going to help you. What is required from your side is see this lecture. Second, along with it is try to understand the lecture rather than simply noting down the content. Once you understand the lecture, then you can make your notes, revise the notes again and again, repeatedly revise the questions that are mentioned in your PYQs, and along with them, try to revise, model your answers, and that is the correct way ahead when you're preparing for this examination. So please remember one thing, merely watching the video doesn't help. What helps is the video, the understanding, your remembering ability also, along with the practice that you do with respect to the previous year questions and the various practice questions that you get at various institutes or places that you are studying. And along with it, please remember, what is required is your will to study. So let's begin today's interesting session, that is on the natural hazard. Okay, when I talk about the concept of disaster management, now this is the core ideal of this particular chapter. What is important here? Before I begin, we need to first decipher what is the meaning of this particular word. Now, the word disaster is derived from a word which is disaster. Now, this is the pronunciation that I'm making, might sound funny, but again, it is known as disastre or disaster. This is the pronunciation that is there. Now, the French word is pronounced in that way, but it is made up of 2 words. This and astre or astre as you basically pronounce. This means bad. Astre or astre means star. That means bad omen or bad star. Something that brings a lot of, let us say, death. Something that brings a lot of problems in the society. That is why this word is associated with this particular concept known as bad omen. Why it is associated? There's a reason behind it. The reason is that because when some disaster happens, it basically leads to a lot of death. Lot of losses with respect to economy, lot of losses with respect to the physical infrastructure. That is why this is a word from which it has been derived. So, having understood the etymological, what do you mean by etymological meaning? Out of what word something has been made. Now, this is the etymological meaning of the word disaster. That means this astre, bad omen, something that brings a lot of losses, loss of physical infrastructure, loss of life. right? Okay. Now comes the concept disaster. Please remember one thing, students. When you are doing this particular chapter, there are a lot of confusions that people face. Why? You tend to confuse certain words like what is disaster, what is vulnerability, what is risk, what is capacity. Then you confuse what is preparedness, what is mitigation. These are the concepts that you should know. That is why, please remember, merely knowing, okay, what is tropical cyclone, that we do already in the physical geography book of the other NCERT. But understanding these concepts become the major ideal. What UPSC has been testing you is, please remember, they want you to understand the concept that are associated. Supposingly they ask you about mitigation. Now, many people might understand that mitigation is a process that some disaster has taken place and you want to resolve it. Or they might understand to mitigate a problem that comes. So that means it might be some disasters taken place. So whatever you are doing after that is mitigation. No, it is not. That is why, please understand, when you read certain English words, their meaning in the English dictionary and its meaning with respect to disaster management might vary a little bit. That is why understanding these concepts becomes very, very important. So please requesting you, every single concept that is being taught to you over here with respect to disaster and the terms associated with them, please note them very carefully. Understand them first. That is what is required. That is why, please remember, I've used certain representations before I explain each word in detail. Now, the concept that comes is, we understood the etymological meaning of disaster. What do you mean by the word disaster? Now you realize something, that it is a serious disruption. Why it is a disruption? If supposingly you're staying in your house and an earthquake is trembling the, let us say, the ground, it is a disruption that is taking place. Now, to what extent the disruption is, that will be impacting the physical infrastructure, the lives lost. If the earthquake is, let us say, is not very severe, it might shake the ground, you can feel it, but not disturb to an extent that an earthquake that generally happens in the region near Japan might be impacting the lives. So that means it also depends upon what is the intensity, and that automatically intensity as well as the magnitude of the earthquake. So both of them are very, very important here. So when we see a serious disruption in the functioning of the community or society causing widespread material, economic, social, or environmental losses, which exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using its own resources. Now, what does it mean? Now, please understand, disaster is something that is basically disrupting the functioning of the society, and there is widespread what? Losses of life, environmental losses, commercial losses, communication link losses, and it is that stage where this disaster might take the society, where the losses that have happened are so much, can happen or lead to so much losses that it is difficult for them to cope up with the resources that are available. Now, let us take an example. Have you ever seen that when you saw the tsunami disasters that basically happened in Japan, right? In spite of being a developed nation, you realize that they have the resources, but whole world came together. Even India exported a lot of necessities, United States, Germany, and so many countries. Why? Because the disaster was so severe that it impacted the every instance of every life that was present in Japan. That is why, please remember, something that is leading to widespread losses. Now, that can be natural, that can be man-made also. It depends upon the scenario. But over here, we have to understand few concepts. What is that? First, it is basically disrupting the functioning, first. Second, widespread losses with respect to human, material, economic, environmental aspects. And third thing is, it is difficult for the man to cope up using its own resources, because the disaster might lead to so many problems and so much losses that a country or a region itself might not cope up. That is what. Now, that extent basically depends upon the severity of the disaster. Clear? Now, having understood this concept, we need to understand certain aspects. Please understand, disaster itself is a very huge word. Disaster itself is a very huge word which comprises a lot of things. First, It is an outcome of a hazard. Now, please understand, in this particular thing that I've explained, there are 4 keywords that are mentioned here. If you note down those keywords or understand those keywords, I will be explaining them in the coming slides. Now, see here. I said the disaster is basically an outcome of a hazard. That is one. It is an outcome of, along with it, vulnerability. It says insufficient capacity. Now, there's something known as capacity also that you should know. Capacity in measures to reduce the potential chances of risk. 4th is risk. Now, do you realize when I talk about disaster, there are 4 ingredients that we have to focus on. First is a hazard. Second is the vulnerability. Third is the capacity. And 4th, the risk. Now, these 4 things, if you understand, these basically make up or make you understand the concept of the disaster. You understood the definition of disaster. Now, these are the 4 things that you need to understand. Now, before I go into each one of them in detail, we need to have an overview what it basically stands for. Let's see, when I'm placing disaster in the center, these are the 4 major aspects that are associated with a disaster. First, hazard. It says it is a dangerous condition or event that is leading to a threat or a potential threat. Now, let us assume that there is an instance where you realize there is shaking of the land and an earthquake has taken place. Earthquake itself is a hazard, right? But you realize that, okay, it did not impact the region so much, but let us assume there's an earthquake taking place in near the, let us say, deep ocean region, where it did not impact the mainstream Japanese population, right? But again, seismograph and all had basically measured that there was an earthquake in the deep sea region, let us say in the ocean region, along, or let us say 200, 500 kilometers away from Japan. Do you realize that earthquake did not impact Japanese society directly, but there is a threat now of what? Of a tsunami that might happen. So it is a condition that was created that will lead to a threat. Now, earthquake itself can be a hazard, right? Depending upon the severity. So it is a condition that leads to a threat. Now, threat, or let us say potential threat, that might lead to a lot of losses and all. That is what a hazard basically is. Now, supposingly, let us take another example. I say a tropical cyclone is forming along the coast of India. Let us say Arabian Sea this time, right? Arabian Sea coast, a tropical cyclone is forming. Now, the formation of the cyclone is a condition, an event. Normally, there is no problem. Supposingly, the meteorological department says that the formation of the cyclone is becoming very severe and it is going to hit the western coast of India. Now, do you realize that that condition is leading to a possible threat or a potential threat to the western coast region of India? That is why it will be treated as a hazard. Now, please understand that. Over here, something that you should understand, hazard is something that we study is basically an event that leads to a problematic situation. Clear? Okay. Now comes second aspect of vulnerability. Sometimes when you see the maps of India, these regions are vulnerable, these regions are more vulnerable. What does it mean? It means the extent of damage that can be caused by a hazard is referring to the vulnerability. Now, let us assume, I tell you that, let us say a tropical cyclone took place, is basically originating in the region of Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal. And you know that very well that the coastal regions will be more vulnerable. Why? Because when the tropical cyclone, because you realize that tropical cyclone derive their energy from the water that is around, because it works like an engine where the latent heat is basically responsible, or the hidden heat is responsible for continuous supply of energy. Now, if water supply is cut, you will realize that the tropical cyclone after some time will just vanish away, right? So that is why you realize the tropical cyclones hitting or affecting more the coastal regions. Clear? While the temperate cyclones that come, now there is frontal activity that is associated, that is something different that we study. Over there, there is no need or conditions like the case of the tropical cyclone. So what do you see? The extent of damage that can be caused by a hazard, that is known as a vulnerability. Now, please understand, there's one more concept that is associated with risk. Any region which is more vulnerable, you will realize it is more risk prone also. Why it is more risk prone? Because that particular region will have more losses that are associated with that. That is, losses might be associated with human life, infrastructure and all. So that is why what do we see? The measure of the expected losses due to the hazard. Now, what happens is, you often hear the word risk analysis. Clear? Now, risk analysis is something that is done much prior to some event happening, or even let us say an event is originating, let us say a tropical cyclone is originating and you are basically analyzing the situation. In that particular case, what do you see? When I say risk analysis, what do you mean by that? We say this will lead to these problem. It might impact this amount of infrastructure. It might impact this number of lives. What do you mean? That is a risk analysis. That is why it is a measure of the expected losses. You can take in monetary terms also, what losses will happen, or how many people are dying numerically also due to a hazard is a risk. That is why regions which are more vulnerable are the regions where more risk is associated with them. That means there will be more problems, right? Next comes the capacity. Now, the word capacity that was mentioned here, please understand. We had mentioned here 4 words: hazard, vulnerability, risk, and capacity. We have done all these 3. Capacity, please understand. Do you realize when I say, when you're preparing for the examination, I say, are you capable enough of qualifying? This is a general connotation that people come across, right? General view that comes up. Supposingly, again, I say some people prepare for the examination and supposingly they fail in the first attempt. And I say, do you still have the capacity in spite of the failure or the ability to even work harder in the next attempt? What does it mean? It is basically referring to the resources or means to withstand, to cope, or to recover from a disaster that has taken place. That is known as a capacity. A very important concept. Supposingly a region has been affected by some hazard or disaster has taken place, as we say, what is the capacity of that particular region to recover from the disaster that has taken place? Or for that matter, you can realize that when we say cope up, recover, or to deal with that situation, that is known as what? Capacity. So these 4 ingredients, please understand, make up the concept of disaster. This should be very clear to you. These words should be very clear to you. Next, now let us understand each one of them in detail. Till now, what I told you was briefly an overview, an outline, so that you can revise it. Now, let us deal with each one of them in detail, because these are those concepts which you normally do not get. Please remember, while doing this, you should understand that along with the NCERT that is present in the class 11th, there is a supplementary NCERT for the disaster management. We have referred to that also while creating this particular content, right? Let's begin. Hazard. What is hazard? The core idea is, I've already highlighted, it is a dangerous condition or event. What is it? It is a dangerous condition or event that threatens or has a potential for causing injury to life or damage the property and the environment. So what does it mean over here? It is a dangerous condition or event that might lead to a lot of problems, let us say potential threat, injury, and property. Now, disaster is a macro term because it is dealing with the aspects of capacity also, risk also, what happens before that also, what happens after that also. But over here, hazard is something that is actually an ingredient of it, where the conditions are created which basically leads to a lot of losses or life being taken. Over here, you realize that there are 2 broad categories when we are studying the concept of disaster. First, natural disasters, and then man-made disasters. When I talk about natural disaster, these are something that is happening naturally. Let us say an earthquake happens. Earthquake can happen due to man. Let us say there is a nuclear blast that has taken place. Now that might lead to some major disaster happening. Let us say in the form of earthquakes, a nuclear blast leading to an earthquake, that can happen. It can lead to tsunamis also. A lot of things can happen. Now, some things can be associated, some natural events and man-made things can be associated. There is no issue. But right now, when we are talking about something that happens naturally, you realize certain aspects like tropical cyclones, volcanic eruptions, or for that matter, let us say earthquakes. These are natural happenings. these and problems that are leading, these conditions that are created that lead to a lot of losses, a lot of problems, these can be referred to as a natural hazards. Now, caused by the natural phenomena like cyclones, tsunamis, earthquakes, something that is done by human being and human activities, let us say wars, you're dropping a lot of bombs. One of the case studies that came is, if you will realize that a lot of bombs were dropped by the United States Air Force during the time of Afghanistan war. And post that, you realized there was an instance where a series of earthquakes also happened. And various researchers had basically told that the amount of energy that was released because of the bomb led to a lot of disturbances with respect to the regions in Afghanistan, and automatically the outcome was the various severe earthquakes that took place in that particular region. That is why you realize that wars, leakage of toxic waste, pollution are also an outcome of the man-made hazards. Clear? So hazard can be man-made, hazard can be natural. There can be a lot of things which are related also, like dropping the bomb leading to an earthquake. That will be over here man-made hazard, right? Chaliye. Types of hazards. Please remember something that is mentioned here in NCERT. There's a classification that is given. As I have drawn in the board, there are two slides over here. There's two slides basically mention the various types and the various examples. Now, please remember, in your examination, what they do generally is they will put, let us assume, they will put water and climatic hazard, and they will put certain examples over here. If you haven't read this properly, there's a great possibility that you might get it wrong. How? So let us say, in the environmental hazard, the NCERT puts pest infection, right? But under biological, it puts pest contact. Now, if you haven't read the NCERT, do you realize these are the reasons why you get your answers wrong? The UPSC is basically going to follow the NCERT. This is very clear. Now, these are because it is a document that is prepared by the Government of India. Now, if you do not read them and you read superficial stuff present in the market, and that is a major reason why many people get many questions wrong, which you could have otherwise got right because you had read NCERTs in that case. This is a major problem that arises. This is a very simple example here. If you see here, pest infection is put under the environmental hazard, whereas the pest attack is put under the biological hazard. Now, if you are sitting in the examination, just assume you're sitting in the examination, and at that particular moment, is your mind going to work, whether it is biological, whether it is environmental, if you haven't read it? If you have read it, you have noticed it, and you straight away mark the answer. That is why those people who have read very big books, standard books, 1000-page books, but haven't read the NCERT over there, this part is missing. Because they tend to give their own philosophies on those books. And in that particular case, when you miss it, that costs you the whole year by not getting your name in that preliminary result. Do not do this. A warning to you again in this lecture again, as I do in every lecture. Do not do this. Read the NCERTs, every line of the NCERT. That is your first goal towards qualifying the major goal of being or getting your name in that so sacred PDF of the UPSC. That is Union Public Service Commission and getting a rank in the civil services examination, right? So see here, geological hazard, something that is related to geology, okay? Now, obviously it will be aspect dealing with a lot of lithospheric activities. Earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruption, landslides, dam burst, mine fire. So all these things have been put under geological hazards. Clear? Next comes water and climatic hazards. What does the NCERT classifier put all these over here? Now see here. Tropical cyclones, tornadoes and hurricanes, floods, droughts, hailstorms, cloudburst, landslides, heat and cold waves, snow avalanches, erosion. Now the question will come, sir, why has a landslide been present over here also and here also? This can again be a question for you. They can put, understand this very well, they will put landslide can be classified among which of the following types of hazards? First, first they will put geological, water climatic, environmental, biological, accidental related. Then they will put only 1 and 2, 1 and 3. Over there, if you do not know this, because it has been put over here also and here also, by the NCERT, so you will mark it wrong. So it is being classified into both of them. Clear? Because landslides are of various forms. Some of them are related to the water and the climatic hazards. That is why it has been put into both categories. So this should be taken as an exception, or not an exception, but as an understanding that it is present over here also and here also. So it is something that UPSC can pick up. Clear? Okay. Now, many people will consider that sea erosion is mentioned. Can't it be put under geological hazard? Bache, see, I can very well put it here also. I can put under environmental also. But over here it is mentioned in the NCERT is this form classified, is classified in this form. You should follow that particular idea also. Because in the examination, they'll ask you in this form only. Environmental hazard, because see, you can put various things under various categories according to you, because that is an extrapolation of your information of what you have read. But over here, it is important you follow the classification that is given, right? Environmental pollution, deforestation, desertification, and pest infection. Please understand, pest infection is put under the environmental hazard. These are some things that you should very well observe, right? See here. Biological hazard, animal and human epidemics. Again, pest attacks are put under the biological hazard. Food poisoning, weapons of mass destructions, right? Okay, next. Chemical, industrial and nuclear accidents. Please understand, chemical disasters, industrial disasters, oil spills and fires associated with them, and nuclear attacks or disasters that are associated. Last is accident. Now, please understand. Over here, forest fires, building collapses, electric accidents, festival related disasters, mine flooding, boat, road or train accidents, air crashes, rural urban fires, then you have the bomb and serial bombing attacks. Now if you see here, the Air India attack the Air India accident, not attack, Air India accident that took place will be classified under which category? Geological, water climatic, environmental, biological, chemical, or accident related. It is accident related hazard or outcome overall you can say as a disaster. Because again, hazard is an ingredient of the disaster. Clear? So this is the classification given by the NCERT. If you follow this, then only UPSC will give you marks. Because in the MCQs, they will be using this particular criteria. Please remember, it is not only about UPSC. The state PCS even more blindly follow the NCERT because it is an authentic resource given by the government of India. And any other exam, even of UPSC, whether you're giving CDS, whether you're giving NDA and all, they pick it up from here. Even the CAPF exams pick up from these particular types only. Repeatedly questions have been come. You will see in almost every year, not only in civil services, but also in the other civil services and the state PCS, every year questions are picked up from these two charts that are present here. Next, now comes, you have heard or understood what is the concept of a hazard, right? We have understood what hazard basically means, the broad categories, the types of hazard, we've all covered this. Now comes vulnerability. Vulnerable. See here. Over here, let's understand the concept. The extent to which a community, structure, services or geographical area is likely to be damaged or disrupted by the impact of a particular hazard. If some hazard is taking place, which you have seen over here, all these are various types of hazards categorized into various groups. If let us say that hazard is taking place, what is the extent to which the damage is going to happen? So that mapping, that understanding of it is basically talking about that particular region being more vulnerable. So see here again, the extent to which a community, people, structure, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is social structure, whatever, services or geographical area can be landforms also, likely to be damaged or disrupted by the impact of a particular hazard on account of their nature, construction and proximity to the hazardous terrain or disaster prone areas. So this is what vulnerability, to what extent or likely the damage is going to happen to that particular area, the people, that is what is the major extent of vulnerability. When I talk about types, First is physical vulnerability. Then physical vulnerability is who or what may be damaged by the natural hazards, right? Natural hazards. Physically, when I talk about physical aspect, it will be related to the physical infrastructure or material aspects over here. Let us say buildings are there, some landforms are there. To what extent can they be modified, damaged, or impacted? When I talk about socio-economic aspects, it has got more to do with the human being, human life, monetary aspects, and all those things. The degree to which population might be affected, because all those things are related to the population aspect. Clear? Okay. Capacity. You know that very well, which I had told you. This is again a very important concept. Capacity, capability. So, the resources, means, and strength which exist in the household, communities, and which enable to cope with, withstand, or prepare for to prevent, mitigate, or quickly recover from a disaster. Now, see here. Let us assume, let me take an example. When I say about capacity, first thing, let us you're preparing for the civil services examination. I will use again a similar connotation to explain you. Supposing you are preparing for the examination and some student comes to me and says, sir, am I capable enough to prepare for this examination? Because let us assume civil services itself is a very big traumatic condition or event that you are going to undergo. That is very clear. Someone will ask me, am I capable enough? What is he trying to ask me? He's trying to ask me, can I go through this journey or a severe journey, which includes a lot of problematic situations, whether it is related to relations, whether it is related to health, whether it is related to mental abilities, right? Second, first, let us say before the preparation, he's asking me. Then let us say he starts preparing. I said, yes, Bachi, you can do it. Then, let us say in the start, just he started preparing, now nothing has happened. He still asks me, again he comes and asks me, sir, am I capable enough of doing or qualifying this examination? I said, yes, you can. After, let us assume, his study, he has given certain mocks, right? Mocks. He gets really bad marks and he still comes to me and asks me, sir, am I capable enough of qualifying this examination? I said, yes, you can. What am I doing? Am I basically telling him that, yes, Bache, you can cope up with this. You can prepare well. Now, let us assume, unfortunately, that candidate, though he's capable enough, let us assume, he gives his preliminary examination and he is not able to pass the examination. Now, what happens is, the previous phases which I mentioned were his ability and capability, which we're talking about, is before that incident happened. That incident, take it as a hazard that has happened, right? Now, he has failed the examination. Now comes the test of its, again, capacity or capability. Because earlier also it was capacity, capability we're talking about. Now also. Why? Now he comes, he's not able to pass the examination and he comes to me and asks, sir, am I still capable enough of qualifying? Do I have the capacity to qualify? I said, Bache, yes, you can. Now it will depend upon his ability to recover from that shock, and does he has the resources? Is he mentally capable enough? Is he has the money to stay in, let us say, Delhi, or buy some courses, or let us say do some test series? So when I talk about capacity, it is again the ability to recover or cope up. It might be before the disaster takes place, because that time also you're preparing. It might be after the disaster also, because in that particular case also, you have already undergone the problems of the disaster or the hazard that has created, and you are still recovering from it. So it covers the aspect before the disaster also and after the disaster also. In both the cases, capacity is judged or checked. Whether no disaster is taken, everything is fine. Do you have the capacity to prepare for any problem that happens? Next, even the disaster has taken place, affected you, do you have the capacity to cope up or come out of the disaster that has taken place? So both these things are covered in the concept of capacity. Please remember, in the UPSC examination, when you are asked about, let us say one statement might be mentioned, they might ask, even they can ask you in mains as a whole question about, give these concepts, and then they might relate it to some other thing. In the prelims also, let us say the word capacity with respect to disaster management might refer to something that is related to before the event, during the event, and after the event. Yes, it is related to all these. Do you understand these? These are the concepts that are checked. So, the resources, means, and strength which exist in the household communities to cope up or withstand or prepare for, prevent, mitigate, or quickly recover. So, all the stages are covered. When I talk about physical capacity, please understand, it has got to do with do with the aspects of, let us say, infrastructure. Example, infrastructure, right? It might cover aspects of landscapes, right? Where certain aspects are associated, your buildings are associated, whatever be the case. When I talk about socio-economic, it has got directly to do with the human losses or population. Concerns population directly. It is very similar to what aspects we did in the population, similar, right? Next, risk. This is something very important over here. Something that you very often hear when you talk about risk analysis. What is risk analysis? That is why risk becomes very important. And let's understand the concept first, and then I'll explain you. Over here, you see, it is a measure of the expected losses due to a hazard event occurring in a given area over a particular time period. Risk is a function of probability of a particular hazardous event and the losses each would cause. When I talk about risk analysis, it is generally done, what is the possibility that certain hazard is going to create what level of problems or issues. That is why when you talk about stock market, when you read about markets, when you read about, let us say, strategy or international relations, they talk about risk analysis. What is risk analysis? You do not do risk analysis after everything has been done. No, that is when those aspects are post-recovery phase. Risk analysis basically happens is, before, let us say, an event is taking place or happened, you analyze what could be the problems or the losses that can basically happen to the infrastructure, to the human life, to the economy. That is what risk is, right? And that is why you realize the regions, when I talk about more vulnerable, are the regions where there is more risk or associated losses more associated. Clear? See here. It depends upon, the level depends upon the nature of hazard. Now, what the hazard is, let us say something like volcanic eruption has taken place at a great extent. It is more hazardous, so more risk will be involved, right? Next is vulnerability of the element which are affected. Obviously, all those things that are associated with that elements might be dented to an extent. What all is associated with that? For example, if there is an island which is being impacted by a tropical cyclone and nobody is there, for us, there will be minimal risk because the infrastructure is not there, people are not there. So it is like a very least risk zone. But the regions where a disaster is being there, or let us say hazard is being experienced, over there the vulnerability is also high and the risk is also high. Next is economic value, or everything that is associated with the economic aspect is the economic value. So this is what is basically covered when you talk about risk. Now comes the natural hazards, causes, distribution, consequences, and mitigation. Now, when we're talking about this particular thing, please understand one thing very clearly. Whatever is mentioned in the NCERTs, we are covering that right now. There are many other risks, there are many other hazardous situations that are there. Right now, we are covering what is NCERT. When we do the advanced level on the YouTube, we will be covering that also. We are assuring you that we will be covering all the NCERTs of geography. Along with that, yes, obviously the other subjects will be covered by various other teachers. But obviously geography I'll be dealing on the YouTube, where I'll be covering other aspects. As we go in the advanced level, you will be realizing that we will be covering other aspects also. Clear? So right now we're confining ourselves to the NCERT aspect, right? Okay, as we had promised you. First is the earthquake. Now you very well know that when I talk about earthquake, what do you mean by earthquake? Earthquake are the vibrations that are basically taking place at the Earth's surface due to the certain release of energy, right? So how do we define an earthquake? These are the vibrations that the Earth's surface, on the Earth's surface, caused by certain release of energy in the Earth's crust or the upper mantle. Had we been doing the physical geography, the other NCERT, I would have explained you the concept of elastic rebound theory also, because you realize that as the plates are moving, you realize there is certain pressure that is created which has to be released for the plates to adjust themselves, and that release of energy basically causes a lot of trembling, which is known as what? Earthquakes. Okay, now see, when I talk about earthquake, what are the causes? Now see, first is earthquake due to plate tectonics. Now, due to the sudden release of energy during the tectonic activities in the earth crust, there is an instance known as earthquake. Now please understand through certain diagrams. Though you would have studied in the other part also the physical geography, which we will cover if you haven't. Now, if you realize this is the inner core, this is the outer core, and this red part basically refers to the convectional currents that are created. right? Now convectional currents are created. Now this is what? These are the plates. Now if you realize, these plates are moving towards the side. These plates are moving towards the side. Why are they moving? Please understand this very carefully. When the convectional currents rise, they exert pressure on these layers of, that is, plates, and they try to pull them on the either side. See here, this convectional current is rising, it is moving this side and then moving down. So this cycle is created over here also. Now when this plate over here is pulled towards that side, what is known as? It is known as slab pulling. This particular part will move towards the left, this will move towards the right. Now you very well know that this is a region, because this is a region where new crusts would be created. That is why you realize when you go to the regions of the Atlantic Ocean, right? Over there, a lot of ridges are created. How are they created? Because see, volcanic eruption will take in place, new crusts will be created, and again this process will continue. Over here you realize this crust will basically go inside the mantle again and finish itself. So what do you see over here? New crusts are being created and they are being destroyed over here. Clear? That is mean construction taking place, destruction taking place. So when these plates are moving towards the either side, there can be various instances. That means earthquake zones can be here also, earthquake zones can be here also, right? That is why please understand this diagram becomes very, very important over here. Now, if I want to analyze this diagram in a more easy manner, let us see this. Now see, can I see this particular region as this particular region? Let us analyze, let us put one over here, right? One here. Can I put one over here? Right? The plates are moving apart because of the slab pull action or the pressure that is exerted by the convectional current inside the mantle. See here, both these plates are moving towards the side. Now this movement itself will lead to creation of, let us say over here, you will see ridges will be created, then they will also move apart. But this movement itself will lead to earthquakes also, because again, what is going on? The movement of the plates is taking place. So when the movement happens, what happens? Earthquakes are created. Now let's see this another part. Do you realize where a plate basically goes underneath another plate? You see there is this depression that is created. This depression, this is known as a trench. That is why when you see the trenches, marine trench and all, they're an outcome of one plate basically subducting or going underneath another plate. Now, if I see this particular case, let me put it as point number 2. Can I see this particular case? Now see over here. This plate is moving underneath this particular plate. Clear? That means, please understand, obviously new plate will be created over here. As we see, something is going down, new crust is being created over here, na? So this process will continue. This process of creation and destruction is again something that is very core, because if something is being, let us say some crust is moving inside the mantle, then an outcome would be new crust will be created here. So don't worry about that, it is only being destroyed, not created. No, both processes are going on simultaneously. Now if this particular crust is basically going underneath, or let us say this plate is going underneath the this particular plate, what is going to happen? By default, you realize this, that it is going to shake, or let us say cause movement with respect to the plates, and this movement will basically lead to again what is known as an earthquake. Now please understand, definitely you realize this, as it moves around there might be certain earthquakes, that there may be certain volcanic activities to be taking place here also. That is something different we will be studying later on. These are the two cases. Third, another case, when we have studied in these two cases 1 and 2, this is basically explaining this particular diagram. But there are many instances where you realize instead of something going apart or subducting, there are cases where two plates might be sliding across, like sliding, right? Now this sliding might also cause earthquakes. That is why please understand, there is no such loss or creation of some plate, but this sliding itself leads to what is known as earthquakes. So these are constructive plate boundaries, constructive plate boundaries, destructive because destroyed, or a conservative, there is no loss of plates as such, only they're sliding to each along with each other. So that is why these three concepts become very, very important to you with respect to the causes for the earthquake. Other causes can be volcanic eruptions. Now, volcanic eruptions can itself exert a lot of pressure that might lead to earthquakes. Rock fall at a major extent, mining areas might also cause, let us say, some bomb blast has been taken place in the mining areas that might result in an earthquake. Now, when I measure the earthquakes, now again, measuring of the earthquakes becomes very, very important. See here. First is a Richter scale which measures the magnitude. Please understand. Richter scale measures the magnitude. This is one place where many people get it wrong. Why in the examination you forget Richter scale is measuring the magnitude or it is measuring the intensity. This is a major problematic issue. If you want to remember it, I'll tell you the mnemonic also, but first remember this. Richter scale measures the magnitude. What is the meaning of magnitude? Magnitude means the amount of energy that is released. First. Second, Mercalli scale is basically measuring the intensity. Intensity basically means the effect of the earthquake. What is the effect? What are the problems that might be associated as an outcome that leading to after an earthquake? What will be the impact? So the effects of the earthquake are basically seen in the intensity. Now let us see here. See here, IMR. Can you remember this? IMR. Generally we see infant mortality rate. Now, how you will remember it? See this. First consider this. Intensity by Mercalli scale or Mercalli scale. Then consider MR, magnitude by Richter scale. Will you all remember this? If you remember IMR, you're basically remembering that the intensity of an earthquake is mentioned by the Mercalli scale. MR, the magnitude of an earthquake is measured by the Richter scale. You will never in your life forget this. The problem arises in the examination, they might put Richter scale, intensity, and then these are the most common questions that are asked. In particular, the PCS paper, in UPSC also they can ask after an interval of few years. So you should remember this. Clear? Okay. Now, few concepts that are associated. Within the surface of the earth, you realize there is a point, there's a particular point inside from where basically the earthquake originates. This is known as a focus or the hypocenter. Focus or the hypocenter. So within the earth's surface, or inside, you realize the point where the earthquake basically originates. That is known as the focus or hypocenter. Clear? Exactly perpendicular to it, a region on the surface is known as the epicenter. Now, this is the region where maximum damage takes place. If the epicenter is, let us say, a lot of, let us say, kilometers below, or the depth increases, the damage caused in the epicenter will be less. If the focus is closer to the surface, greater will be the damage, because again, it takes time for the energy to be transferred. What did you understand? The point inside, within the surface, within the earth, where the earthquake originates is known as the focus. Deeper the focus, lesser will be the problems that might be caused or issues might be resulting in what? The epicenter. Now, it depends upon what is the scale. If it is closer, by default, there will be more damage, because the energy being transferred from a particular point to the surface, the distance decreases, so more energy will be transferred. Dissipation of energy will be less. In that case, closer the focus to the surface, greater the damage. First. Second, a line drawn perpendicular to the focus with respect to the surface, if we see, on the surface is a point known as epicenter. The point on the earth's surface directly above the focus, which is the one which is experiencing the maximum damage. That is known as epicenter. Clear? Focus is also known as a hypocenter. The word might be used as an alternative. Okay. Now comes the distribution pattern. See, I've drawn all this by hand. Again, it becomes important for you because this you should have a brief idea, because you can be asked with respect to earthquake or demarcation of the zones, or with respect to preliminary examination also. Now, if you see first, let us say The yellow regions are known as very low damage zones. So the regions which experience very less because the stability of the, let us say, the surface of the plate. Now over here, because see, within the plate you realize this is the Indian plate, but certain regions are very stable because of their geology or due to the structure of the rocks that are present here. So these are the regions which you realize very low, which are mentioned in the yellow region, right? Second comes low damage risk zone. Now this was very low, this is low. Please understand, it doesn't mean that when I'm mentioning low or very low, nothing can happen, that this is wrong. What we basically say is certain regions are lesser vulnerable, certain regions are more vulnerable. That is why the risk analysis will also take place accordingly. Certain regions which are high risk zone, highly vulnerable, there will be more risk. Yes, then one has to prepare for them accordingly. That means it will also measure upon the capacity that is there. If disaster happens, that means a hazard is happening. So please understand, disaster covers all these aspects that are associated. So that is why it is a very macro term. The pink regions that have been marked over here refer to the low damage risk zone. When I mention or see the white regions, this is a third level, which is basically the moderate damage risk zone. When I see something that is in this orange color, if you realize over here, 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 these are the high damage risk zone, and the ones which are marked in red, northeastern region, parts in Bihar, in Uttarakhand region, Himachal, in the Jammu Kashmir region, in the regions of Kutch and all, you realize these are the very high damage risk zone. Clear? You can have a look at this map. Again, a very, very important map for you. This can be asked in the UPSC, in the prelims, they might ask you certain regions and they might ask you questions on that you should know. Okay, consequences of earthquakes, please remember. See, we can add a lot of other points also, but we're confining ourselves to the NCERTs. So that is why these points have been mentioned. What are the consequences? Damages and destroys infrastructure, settlement, transport and communication links. Material and socio-economic cultural losses, let us say religious places, let us say something associated with your economy, something associated with your border car that is being destroyed. So a lot of things are basically lost over here. Leads to fire, damage, dam fires, landslide might happen because of earthquakes. Leads to death of the people, again something very sad. Economic losses to the people and the government by default, because the government has to again repair everything, the roads, the infrastructure and also a lot of losses basically happen. Clear? Okay. Earthquake hazard mitigation. Please understand, establishing earthquake monitoring centers, using geographical positioning system, preparing vulnerability maps and using obviously technology for that, educating the people, modifying the house types and the building designs. You can just have a look over here. These are the earthquake hazard mitigation. Okay, let's move ahead. Droughts. Now, please understand the word drought itself is something that you have been hearing or you're studying in history also, because something associated with absence of water, right? But when we study this, there are various types of droughts which we study, and it has been asked in the papers repeatedly in the previous years also, not only in civil services examination, but also various examinations of civil services, various examinations of UPSC and the various other state PCS examinations also. So this becomes very important, especially this classification of the fourfold types of droughts. If you understand the keyword of these four droughts, nothing else is required with respect to the conceptual clarity. So what do you see here? It refers to the absence of water for a long period. Now, this is something very important. If there is absence of water, let us hypothetically, for one day or few hours, that is not drought. There is absence of water for a very long period. That is what is considered as a drought. I think that makes it very clear. Yeah? Okay. Now, when I talk about the drought, we should understand there are four types which have been mentioned in your NCERT. If you see various other books, they might be using various other aspects. They might be using certain other theoretical aspects. We do not have to go into all that. For us, what is important is what is mentioned in your NCERT. Because UPSC will accept that. Many people, while preparing for this examination, please note this very carefully. Many people, while preparing for this examination, will have a view that let us study those big books, big, thick books, 1,000 pages books, and we will see NCERT because NCERT are school books. What is the need for studying them? That is the first step towards you following or not being able to achieve your goal. When you are basically done with your graduation or doing a graduation, definitely when you talk about studying NCERT or when teachers recommend studying NCERT, there is an ego that is hurt. How can we study a class 6th, a class 10th or a class 12th book when we've already done a graduation? Please remember, you need to keep your ego aside. First step is to be humble by keeping your ego aside. Over here, reading the books become mandatory, particularly the NCERT. Out of my experience, I'm telling you, there are various books which also mention the types of hazards, but over there, whether it is a hazard of a drought, whether it is a hazard of, let us say, flood, in various cases, I've seen that something contradicts the NCERT, and many times when you have read that book, you might be marking an answer wrong in your paper. That is why keep your preparation simple. Do these things. Obviously, if it is required, your teachers might be teaching you certain advanced stuff also. You can add those things to your notes, but this forms a basic. If you leave the basics and go towards advanced, it is very similar to putting an analogy where you realize that a person wants to spell Czechoslovakia before even knowing what ABCD is. In that particular attempt of spelling Czechoslovakia before doing your ABCD well, it will cost you a lot of years because you do not have the basics strong. It will not give you the desired result also. So do not do that. Clear? See here. First is the meteorological drought. Second is the agricultural drought. Third is the hydrological drought. Fourth is the ecological drought. Clear? Now see over here very well. What do you mean by meteorological drought? The keyword over here is there is prolonged absence of rainfall. That means there is inadequate rainfall. There is inadequate rainfall. Clear? Second is agricultural drought. Now over here, when I talk about agricultural drought, what is the keyword? It is basically low soil moisture. Now please understand, there are two keywords in fact. Merely having low soil moisture is not leading to an agricultural drought. Why? See, low is a very relative word. What is, let us say, if I want to drink water, or let us say someone wants to drink water. For me, drinking a whole bottle is very fine of water. So for someone, let us say drinking half a bottle will be adequate for them. Low is a very relative word. What is important here? Low soil moisture, which basically leads to crop failure. Low soil moisture leading to crop failure, then it is known as an agricultural drought. So those two keywords, if missing, will lead to a wrong answer. In the examination, the question comes with respect to the agricultural drought, consider the following statements. First, it is marked by low soil moisture. Second, it leads to the crop failure. Now, many will be singing, okay, low soil moisture, theek hai, it's fine, we have studied this. Crop failure, no, not necessary. Then people will be marking only one. These are the two mandatory conditions. The question can even be modified. What is the necessary condition associated with an agricultural drought? In that necessary condition, you might mark low soil moisture, but you might not mark the crop failure. So please, every single word that I'm mentioning and underlining becomes very important for your analysis, which you might be missing even if you are reading your NCERTs. Hydrological drought. Now please understand, water storage levels. What do you mean by water storage level? The places like reservoirs, tanks, and all places where water is stored. Now, if you realize this, then the water storage level falls below what precipitation can replenish. That means, let us say there are certain dams, tanks where water is being stored, where the utilization is much more, but its replenishment by the rainfall or the means is less. That means consumption more than it being replenished. It will lead to a hydrological drought. Clear? Ecological drought. This is again very important. When the productivity of the natural ecosystem falls due to the shortage of water, right? Productivity of the natural ecosystem. Now over here, these keywords that are being mentioned are the key ideals of your drought or their classification of the types. Please note them well. Please note them well. Next, drought areas. Now please understand, this is a map that basically shows you the regions which are more drought prone or less drought prone. Understand this. This region which is marked in red, you very well know the soil, you very well know the climatic condition, you very well know the vegetation. So this is a region which is extremely drought prone. When you come to the second category, that is zone 2. This is the region marked in this purple color. It is a severe category. That means severe drought or problematic situations might arise over here also, here also, here also. Then next is moderate, third. That means these are regions where, yes, you can face droughts, but again, lesser than in comparison to zone 1 and zone 2. The white regions are drought-free areas. Now, please, there is a, though we are studying NCERT, that is why I'm not going into advanced concepts also. If you realize today's time, this map is being slowly modified because of the climatic changes. Now, the problem that arises sometimes is because in this particular region, drought-prone regions have been marked over here. Now, in the civil services, they can ask you, the regions of Meghalaya come under the category of moderate drought areas. This is one statement, let us say, among the various other statements. Now, over there, you realize that the map over here mentions drought-free, so it does not fall under any moderate, severe, or extreme regions. These are the types of questions or statements that are picked up from the NCERT. When you are seeing or looking at the paper, at that time you will be realizing the UPSC has made questions such difficult lines. From where do they pick up? They pick it up from these books only. But the only difference is that you are not reading or going between the lines. What do you mean by between the lines? That means what the problem that students face is, please remember this. When I tell you to read the NCERTs, you tend to read the NCERT in a way, just read it, done. You take it as something like kids do. You give them a toy, they play with them, done. Okay, new toy. But it is not a toy. It is something that you need to learn from. That is why read between the lines. Over here, the concept means that understand what it is trying to convey to you. Then again comes a map study. If you see the map, the moment the people see the map, they tend to say, okay, this is fine, we will know, we will manage it. We will make the map in our examinations on our own, because we know that the Thar desert region is extreme region and the regions surrounding it are less severe, moderate, so on and so forth. But in the examination, and the questions are picked up from this region, you say, oh, had I studied the map, possibly I would have answered this question. And then you regret, and by that time you have already wasted a few attempts. Every single word, every single map in your NCERT becomes important if you genuinely want to qualify this examination. Consequences of droughts. It will lead to crop failure, leading to scarcity of fruit grains. Fruit grains failure is known as akal in Hindi, and fodder is known as trinkal. That means there is deficit with respect to fodder or with respect to food grains. Large-scale death of cattle and other animals is seen. Migration of humans and livestock, scarcity of water compels people to even consume contaminated water. Now, please understand, luckily, today India is in a situation where you might see regions experiencing less rainfall, but these types of conditions are not present in India, where you realize that people are dying on a massive scale because of lack of water. If you see, you realize situations of famine, drought-like conditions of 1943 in Bengal, where close to 3 or 4 million people died. Whether those were outcome of the policies of the British. But today time, you realize we have a lot of storage of food, infrastructure that is there, replenish. We have water trains that are running on those regions where there is deficit. That is why India has changed a lot. We do not say that everything is perfect. Now, nothing can be perfect anywhere in that country, or any country for that matter. But do you realize things have changed? Today, do you see that millions of people are dying because of drought and famine in India? No. Why? You see, this is the small steps that we have taken towards self-sufficiency, towards advancement. And we should appreciate them also, right? Okay. Measures immediate. Provision of immediate should be distribution of safe drinking water, medicines for victims, availability of fodder and water for the cattle, shifting the people and livestock to safer places. These are the immediate actions which might be taking if certain drought happens. Long term is identification of the groundwater potential in the form of aquifers, transfer of river water from the surplus to the deficit, concept of interlinking of rivers, which has already been there from a long time from the government's policy perspective. We have already seen the Ken-Betwa link aspect. Remote sensing and the satellite imagery, dissemination of knowledge, and rainwater harvesting. So these are the important things from a long-term perspective become important. Now comes tropical cyclone. Another hazard, important one. Now, see, we are not going to go to the very details and intricacies of what tropical cyclone is, because we will be doing in the other NCERT. That is in the topic of climatology. We'll be doing there. Right now, we are doing the Indian geography, so we will be restricting ourselves to the important aspects of disaster management. See here. Tropical cyclones are intense low pressure. The moment I talk about cyclone, please remember, cyclones the concept by the cyclone means the center region is a low pressure area. Anticyclone are marked by what? Central high pressure conditions, right? So I had told you in the climatology chapter also that low pressure is again associated with what? Heat, let us say, temperature high. Now, when we talk about cyclones, anticyclones and all, we will be covering that in the climatology chapter. Over here, let us deal with the disaster management aspect. Tropical cyclones are intense low pressure areas confined to the areas lying between 30° north and 30° south latitudes in the atmosphere, around which high velocity winds basically blow. Now, this tropical cyclone is known by various names in various parts of the world. Now, though we are doing disaster management, still this became important for you to understand. Typhoons in the Northwest Pacific Ocean, hurricanes in the North Atlantic Ocean, Northeast Pacific and South Pacific Ocean, tropical cyclones in the Southwest Pacific Ocean, Northeast Indian Ocean, then severe cyclonic storms, North Indian Ocean, willies in the regions of Australia, tornadoes in the South American region. Now, these are the basic term or terminologies that you should be knowing. This has been asked previously in the papers also and will be asked in the future also, if not only UPSC, but other exams of UPSC and along with it, the state PCS examinations, right? Okay. Now comes certain conditions, though it was not required, but I've put it over here so that just to maintain a continuity. You see the diagram of the tropical cyclone also. Now, please understand what are the conditions that are required for the tropical cyclone. It requires warm sea water, temperatures above 27°C, and that is why you realize this is a region where it is confined in this particular region, right? Because this adequate conditions are provided here. Warm sea water is required. That is why you realize when the tropical cyclone enter the mainland or the land surface, after sometimes it dissipates because there is cutoff of the cyclone from the warm water surface, right? Warm water surface, sea temperatures are above 27°C, large and continuous supply of warm and moist air, strong Coriolis force. Coriolis force is nothing but an outcome of the rotation of the earth, which you realize that air moving towards the, let us say in the northern hemisphere, tend to turn towards the right in the northern hemisphere and towards the left in the southern hemisphere, basically the effect which you see with respect to Coriolis force. Or if you realize that Coriolis force is basically the deviation of the air in the northern and the southern hemisphere, right? Unstable conditions through the troposphere that basically create certain disturbances, which leads to the creation of larger disturbances in the form of tropical cyclones. And then is absence of a strong vertical wind wedge. Now, this disturbs the vertical transport of latent heat. Please understand, latent heat means the hidden heat, which is basically serving as a engine over here, which is supplying energy to the tropical cyclone. And that is why if there is some, let us say, strong vertical wind that is rising, that will basically disturb the supply of energy and will lead to the tropical cyclone as an engine setup that is moving will get disturbed and it will dissipate. So that is why this last point of absence of strong vertical winds are being presented over here. This you must have studied if you would have studied the physical geography, though when we will start with the physical geography, we will be doing all these things in detail. But our concept over here is with respect to disaster management. Now over here, if you realize, there are a lot of things in the map. Red regions are the ones which are high damage risk zone. Now, if you realize, very high damage risk zone where the speeds of the cyclones might be 55 meters per second. Again, there is another region, very high damage risk zone where the speed is little less. That is why if you realize, there are two very high zones and two moderate zones. It is just the variation in the speed. Clear? So, very high damage risk zone with a speed of 55 meters per second at least. Over here, very high damage risk zone with 50 meters per second. That is 55, this is 50. Next, again, you come high damage risk zone are the regions which are marked in yellow, light yellow. Then comes your moderate damage risk zone, the one in pink with a speed of approximately 44 meters per second. Then there is another moderate, but with a lesser speed of 39 meters per second, that is marked in blue. Last is low risk zone, which is marked in white over here. This is a map which is basically telling you, showing you the cyclone hazard zone across India. Clear? Let's move ahead. Consequences of high winds cause major damage to the infrastructure. Abnormal rise in the sea levels, that is known as storm surges, might take place. Ground and pipe water supply may get contaminated, ruin the standing crops, food stock, disrupt the communication, disrupt the infrastructure, might lead to losses of life and a lot of economic losses to the governments. Risk reduction measures. See, coastal blend plantation can be done as a means. If you realize in the regions of Sundarban also, if you realize the mangrove forest basically tend to lessen the impact of these cyclones in those regions because of the mangroves basically being present there. So this can be done in the other parts also. So coastal belt plantation, hazard mapping properly needs to be done, good construction practices, use of technology to basically determine if there is certain rise of the tropical cyclone and take necessary steps. This has been seen in Odisha also. Lot of cyclones come, and today's the meteorological advancement that have taken place is basically helps the governments also to make quick decision making with respect to future cyclones that might impact the coastal regions, right? Okay. Landslides, again, a landslide is defined as a movement of a mass of rock, debris, or earth down the slope. Something that is moving down the slope, that might be some part of rock, some part of, let us say, debris down the slope. Now, what are the causes that might be leading to landslides? Very often, today's, if you realize the monsoon season is going on right now, and you realize in the hilly regions, particularly in the Himalayan belt, are the ones which are very prone to the landslides here, because those are the young full mountains, and as it rains, the water tends to seep inside, and because of that, then a lot of landslides happen, right? So heavy rain, earthquakes, or volcanic activities or eruptions might basically cause landslides. Deforestation, because why? When you have the forest cover or the green cover, that basically tends to bind the soil. When you remove them, that binding force is gone, and then possibility is there that your let us say the lot of debris might further move down, or the mass of rocks might move down. If you realize construction activities, again, next is shifting agriculture. This also basically lose because you're cutting of the forest. Landslide vulnerability zone, please understand, in the NCERT it is basically mentioned these, and there is no further classification giving, but it is just showing what are the regions which are prone to landslides. So over here, please understand, these are the regions in the Himalayan belts, then the northeastern region and the Western Ghats region also are prone to a lot of landslides. These are the landslide zones or landslide prone zones. Further, they have been classified into very high vulnerability zone, and moderate to low vulnerability zone. The very high basically lie in the Himalayas, Andaman and Nicobar, Western Ghats, Nilgiris and the northeastern region. Then you have the high vulnerability zone. Please understand, it tends to include these regions which are mentioned here, but the scale and impact over here might be less. Then it might be put under the high vulnerability zone. Clear? Next is moderate to low. Trans-Himalayan region, rain shadow areas of eastern and western Ghats are covered in the landslide vulnerability zone classification. Okay, let's move. What are the mitigation? Adoption of an area specific measure. That means, see, if you are dealing with the aspects of landslide of the Western Ghats, those will be very different from that of the Himalayas. Why? Because the Himalayas are the young full mountains. On the other hand, if you realize, the aspects of the Western Ghats, which are relatively very older, over there you will be realizing that the strategy will be different. Clear? So we have to see area specific aspects associated. Adoption of area specific measures, control construction activities in the vulnerable zones, limit agriculture access with moderate slope, promote afforestation, construction of bunds to reduce the flow of water, and terrace farming. These might be very helpful with respect to the mitigation strategies. Okay. Now comes floods. Now floods, by default, you very well understand that. What is flood? Flood basically talks about an overflow of water that submerges land which is usually meant to be dry. Now, by default, in simple words, can I say, let us say water that has to be generally flowing in its water channel or river channel basically comes out, moves out of it because of excess of water that is flowing. Simple words, and it spreads in various parts. So that is why, see, how will it happen? Let us say there is a lot of rainfall, there is a lot of siltation. What is siltation? As the river is traveling through its course, let us say the Himalayan rivers, they bring a lot of sediments along with them. They tend to basically deposit the silt along the, let us say, the river banks. Now that basically raises the level of the water that is flowing, and that might lead to water moving out of their channels. Blockage by the drains, blockage of the streams might lead to water moving out. Cyclones can also cause it, disruption of the river flowing and basically lead to water being spilling out. Construction of dams also, if you realize that it might flood a lot of regions. So these are the causes that are associated. Now, if I see the flood prone zones, if you realize over here, Sabarmati, Mahi regions, if you see the regions which are associated with the deltatic regions of Godavari, Krishna also, these are the regions which you see in Ganga, Yamuna regions, Kosi regions, and obviously the Brahmaputra plains. These are the major flood prone regions. This is what you should be a little bit drawing the map when you are studying it. These handmade maps will work a lot in your examination. Flood mitigation, construction of flood protection embankment, construction of dams and afforestation, discourage major construction along the floodplains, and the flood warning centers should be established so that it is helpful for the people and the government can take necessary steps. Next comes, these are the hazards that we have covered. Now let's come to the next part, that is disaster management. Now please understand, when we talk about disaster, we studied with the concepts of hazard, the concept of vulnerability, we considered the concept of capacity and also the concept of risk. Having studied this, please understand, when we will go to the future lectures where we will be going to the advanced level of geography, over there we will be going to a lot of other concepts. The various plans, decision makings, national disaster management plans, the strategies also. But right now, as we told, we're confining ourselves to the NCERTs, right? Little bit stuff I've added here where we talk about what is disaster management. Please understand, it is mainly a disaster risk reduction strategy where you reduce the risk. How do you reduce the risk? If there is a lot of capacity building, if there are a lot of measures already taken to prevent some disasters and some which are natural, which cannot be controlled, but there is least impact on the people and the economy or socio-cultural aspects. That is how you reduce the risk, right? So it is basically the disaster risk reduction strategy involved in a continuous integrated process of planning, organizing, coordinating, and implementing measures. What do you mean by disaster management in simple words? Let us understand. First step would be that you should make proper plannings, proper prepared or mitigation strategies before a disaster takes place, right? Then you know that if supposingly you have done your work, but then also you realize then disaster takes place, something that is not in your hand. Let us say an earthquake takes place. Now it's something it is not in our hand. Clear? Some tropical cyclone takes place. It is not in our hand. So that takes place. So during the disaster also, before that you have already prepared for things, how they will be impacted based on the risk analysis, all that, everything is prepared. Now some disaster happens. Now during the disaster also you'll be realizing that a lot of steps have to be taken place. Like some people are not following the instructions, so they have to be again taken care of. Some loss of lives might take place in spite of the preparedness. Some loss of basic communication links might take place. So all those things during the disaster also have to be managed so that people have their necessary aspects of water, food available to them. So that is, first is before, then is during the disaster also. Then you realize once the disaster is over, you will realize what has to be done now with respect to recovery. And that also depends upon what we had studied as a capacity or capability. And then also again you learn from those mistakes and see what can be further done to improve with respect to what has happened this time. All these things, all the institutions, all the mechanisms, policies, actions, stakeholders involved in this whole process, before, during, after, and again the cycle continues, is known as the aspect of disaster management. Clear? Now see here. Disaster risk reduction basically involves two prolonged strategies. First, mitigation. Now what do you mean by mitigation? Many people misinterpret it, so you should understand the concept. Measures that are taken to reduce both the effect of the hazard and vulnerability in order to reduce the scale of future disasters. See, what are the steps that have been taken? So in order to reduce the aspect of hazardous outcome that takes place, so that in the future that things do not happen, or you're already getting prepared for it, right? So next is preparedness. Measures taken before the occurrence of a disaster aim to minimize the loss of life, disruption of critical services, and damage. Now let us assume mitigation is overall before anything happens. Let us say right now when nothing is happening. Now you are basically planning, you are making all the strategies, you're making all the infrastructure, everything. If something happens, we should be prepared, right? We should be prepared. All those systematic aspects, policy making, that is known as mitigation aspect. Let us say just after the mitigation, if you realize there's a possibility of some disaster taking place, and before the disaster, you're getting prepared. That is referred to as preparedness. See here. Disaster management cycle, you realize there is something known as before the disaster, that is pre-disaster. What do you do in the pre-disaster phase? Awareness campaigns, strengthen the weak points, preparation of the plans. During the disaster, meeting the needs of the victims, giving them the necessities that is required. After the disaster is recovery and rehabilitation. Having studied this, I've added one more chart in front of you that will make things relatively clear. Let us assume this green line basically refers to before the disaster. This orange line basically refers to after a disaster. Let us begin from here. I told you mitigation, that means long-term planning, strategies that are involved before anything has already happened or is going to take place. Leaving that apart, you're planning that what should be the plan if some disaster happens? What should be the strategies? Who should be responsible? Who should take this? That is all mitigation strategies. Now let us assume there's a possibility of some disaster, and during that time you're getting prepared. That is known as preparation. Now what happens is a disaster takes place. A disaster with respect to, let us say, you can put a word hazard also over here. Let us say a cyclone or earthquake takes place. What will be your response? That is the response immediately during that and along with it after that also. And after that you recover, because immediately you realize immediate need would be, let us say, some disaster or hazard has taken place. You will be meeting the needs of the people. Once that thing is gone, then you will be working on the recovery action. These are the 4 phases. If you see 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously the disaster is another instance. These are the 4 phases which you see with respect to 4 phases of disaster management. This is what was expected from the NCERT that we had to do. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned it. Please remember, candidates, again, this was the last lecture of the Indian physical geography that we have done with you. That is the concept of hazard and the disaster management. Last time, and again advising you all, please remember what all has been done with you in these NCERTs is going to form the core of the foundation of your preparation for the Indian physical geography for the UPSC and other examinations associated with that. If you do them well, I had told you earlier also, you will be able to solve the questions easily. You will yourself observe that, sir, we were not able to understand the questions or concepts previously, nor were we able to solve the pre-IQs or the practice papers. But now we are able to understand and then solve them. I'm guaranteeing you this, that this will be your opinion after you have rigorously done all the 7 lectures. This is not only an advice, take it as an order from a person from whom you are studying. Why I'm telling you and emphasizing on them? Because many people have seen the result and I want you also to experience it. That is why these lectures have been put on the YouTube channel. I will make sure that all the other aspects of the NCERTs, that is the human geography aspect or the physical geography, will also be there. And so that is going to help you to strengthen every aspect, every single concept of the geography, which will help you to sail through this examination, at least from this subject's perspective. So lots of blessings from my side, lots of love from my side. We'll be meeting in another journey and another aspects and another lectures and aspects of geography, which will include the human geography and the physical geography. Take care, and as we always say at the end, Jai Hind.